I am so excited to film this video today because we are going to be talking about my most favorite thing, which is eyeshadow palettes, but not just any eyeshadow palettes. My most favorite kind of eyeshadow palettes, neutral palettes with a twist. Hello and welcome. If you are new here, my name is Rachel, and if you're not new here, thank you so much for coming back. If you are new here, let me just give you a quick little blurb. I love eyeshadow palettes. I talk about eyeshadow palettes a lot here on my channel. I own a lot of eyeshadow palettes.
Stop it. Get some help.
And I am a neutral girl at heart, but sometimes I like to dabble in color here and there. And I absolutely love when a palette has a lot of neutral tones where I can create a neutral look. But if I want to add a pop of color or create a colorful look as well, I can do that. So like I said, have so many palettes in my collection, and I have so many neutral palettes with a twist, but I pulled out 15 to talk about. You think 15's a lot? I had to narrow the list down. And the stipulations for me were that I really had to only choose palettes that are still available. I'm not including any discontinued palettes in this selection. I am thinking of doing a whole other separate video of discontinued eyeshadow palettes in my collection that I wish would come back, that I'm obsessed with and I love. Let me know if you want to see that, because I could definitely do a whole video on that. But I'm going to talk about 15 neutral palettes with a twist that if you are a neutral lover and you want to dabble in color, or if you're like me and you like both neutrals and color, these palettes would satisfy you like they satisfy me. I'm gonna link all of these palettes down below in the description box, along with any discount codes that I may have. And if I did receive any of these palettes in PR, I will try to say it. And if I don't say it, I will also pop it up on the screen just so you know. And if you enjoy this while you're watching it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. When it comes to eyeshadows, I am an indie girl. I just feel like the indie brands do it the best. So most of these palettes are indie palettes. They just have my heart. They do so well with their formulas and their color stories. So let's start off with some of my favorite indie palettes that are neutrals with the twist. I would have to say, and I did do a video talking about my top 3 eyeshadow palettes in every category, and this was in my top 3 neutral palettes with a twist, and this is the Nomad Haunted Europe palette. Now, it has been discontinued, but they are bringing it back Halloween of next year, so I'm kind of cheating by putting this in here, because technically it's coming back, not for a year, but it's coming back, and it'll be worth the wait. Okay. This is my very first palette I ever purchased from Nomad. I love the lenticular cover. I love a spooky theme. We're all here for the spooky theme, right? It's October, and it's just so beautiful. And then here on the inside, we have neutral palette with a twist. And I love that this gives a variety of different undertones, warm tones, cool tones, neutral tones. We have those browns that usually you would get in a neutral palette, but we have some bluish grays, we have some greens, we have a cranberry. Absolutely love it. I would say the formula of this palette is more buildable in terms of the mattes and the shimmers. The shimmers aren't ultra sparkly, in your face, wet looking textured shimmers. They are more of that smooth. They are sparkly, but they're just really pretty and ethereal. And the mattes are incredibly easy to work with. They are not overly pigmented off the bat. They're easy to build up. So if you are a beginner and you want to be able to add a neutral palette with a twist and you love a spooky theme, think about picking this one up when it comes out next year. It is one of my favorite palettes in my entire collection. Last year for my birthday is in October, I treated myself to just picking any palette out of my collection to just play with on my birthday because I'm always testing new palettes. I rarely have a chance to go back and use an old palette, and this was the one I chose to pick out from my collection to put on my eyes for my birthday. That tells you how much I love it. I'm just gonna keep talking about Nomad because I have 2 more palettes from them. They are one of my favorite indie brands. They are a destination-based indie brand, so they theme their collections around different destinations around the world. So I can't talk about neutrals with a twist without talking about the Hudson Valley palette. This is based on Hudson Valley in New York, and it is their fall release for 2022. It doesn't get much more fall than this, am I right? This also accommodates the warm tone and the cool tone lover, where you've got super ultra warm tone foliage colors on this side. You have more of those grassy greens on this side, and then you have 3 beautiful shimmers that are a little bit more opaque. And this is obviously a heavily matte palette, which is my preference. I love a palette that has more mattes than shimmers. And I also love a palette that goes from light to deep in the mattes. That is something that's super important to me. I like to have a transition shade because I'm a baby. I can't do a look without a transition shade. What can I say? So I also love a matte inner corner highlight. So this one is light enough for me to do that. But again, it goes from light to deep, which I absolutely love. And I love warm tone neutrals. They are my favorite colors to wear on my eyes. I just love warm tone neutrals. So this side of the palette really calls to me, but incredible formula and a really beautiful fall palette. And then this came out this year, this palette. Honestly, love. This I put in my ranking all the palettes I've tried this year so far for the first half a year. This came up very high in the countdown. Love the packaging. It matches my chair and it's just so nice to feel because it is a faux suede. And then on the inside, again, we have mostly neutrals with a row in the middle of greens. Greens are some of my favorite colors to wear. If I am gonna wear color, I love green and I love purple. So those are my favorite pops of color. And these greens are my favorite type of greens where they are more warm leaning greens. That is my favorite, where it's got a little bit yellow like this. These two have more of a yellow undertone. This is a true green. And then the shimmers in this are super fun because they are like, not embossed, but what's the name? They've got swirlies in there, right? To represent like a zebra. This one has spots. So they're just fun to look at as well. The shimmers in this are really pretty, a little more on the smooth side, not textured, not over the top, but just really pretty, like standard shimmers. And the mattes in this are very easy to work with. I really enjoy this palette a lot. One of my favorite palettes I've tried this year. And if you love like a lot of brown tones, more towards the warm and neutral side. Like these are cool leaning, but they're not like super cool like some of the other palettes we're gonna talk about, but I really love this palette a lot. Another one of my favorite indie brands is Odin's Eye, and they released a palette this year that also came in really high up in my countdown, and this is the Stone and Rock palette. And by the way, I should have said this disclaimer in the beginning, but let me just quickly say, everybody has a different definition of what neutral palettes are, right? What I think is neutral, you might not think is neutral, and vice versa. And what somebody might think of a neutral palette with a twist might be different. There's no like real definition, right? So this is just kind of what I think of as a neutral palette with a twist. And while I'm going through these palettes, I want to know like what are some of your favorite neutral palettes with a twist, or any of your thoughts on these palettes as well. I would love to know. Anyway, the Stone and Rock palette from Odin's Eye. Oh my goodness. I did receive this in PR, and I did receive both of the Hudson Valley and the Okavango Safari palette in PR. This one does give me vibes of the Okavango, which I've done comparisons before, but the Stone and Rock palette over here is much more cool leaning. So like if you are more of a cool tone lover, I would probably suggest the Odin's Eye. And also the shimmer formulas in this are very different. The shimmer formula in Nomad is pretty standard, smooth, like I said, not textured, no multi-chromes, no special shades. I quite like just like regular shimmers. I really do. So I like this, but I also like sometimes having variety. So the shimmers in this are definitely more stepped up, and there are different formulas. There is a multi-chrome in here, and a lot of these shimmers are a little bit more on the textured side, but this palette is just gorgeous. The mattes in this also are a little more pigmented just in general with Odin's Eye, but I love, love, love this. Even though I'm not a cool tone lover as much, I still love the elements of green in this. I'm so happy to have this in my collection. This is a perfect like neutral palette with a twist for the winter time, in my opinion, because you get those like deeper emerald greens. Ooh, beautiful. Let's just throw in not an indie palette. If you are more of like a high-end person or just like a mainstream person and you want to go to Ulta and pick something up, I actually really like the Too Faced Italian Spritz palette. I think this is a really fun, I would say more like bright pops in here. For me, it feels more like summertime or springtime, but of course, you can wear whatever shades you want at any time. You don't need me to tell you that. You know that, I hope. But I really like this palette. I think it's good. The mattes are super easy to use, and that's why I think Too Faced really does appeal to the masses. I feel like anybody could use these mattes and really get along with them. What I mean by that is they're not hard to blend out. They build on top of each other easily. They're more of a wash of color, but you can build them up. They're not ultra pigmented. And the shimmers in this are nice. I don't love the shimmers in this. Some of them are a little bit more on the chunkier side, which just is more of a preference thing. But if you like bright pops of color where honestly most of the mattes are more neutral leaning. I mean, you do have this more yellow, but I consider this a neutral personally. And then you have this more like corally pop. But again, I feel like that's pretty neutral leaning. And then you have different pops of color if you want like a few pops of color for the lid. I think this is nice. I really recommend this for someone that is more of like a mainstream fan, but you want to like just slightly start to incorporate a couple of like brighter pops of color in your collection. I think it's a good one. One of my other favorite indie brands, which you know if you've been here before, is Blend Money. And Blend Money did release the All Done Up palette last year. And this is one of my favorite palettes from the brand, obviously because I am a neutral lover, that is a part of it, but I also love the packaging and I love how small and compact this is, but still there's a lot of shades in here that you could create several looks. And at first glance, this is very neutral, and it is, but when you start to put these on the eyes, there is that little bit of undertone change that makes it a little bit more leaning, colorful. Like this row here, the second row is green. Like it's hard to tell looking at it, but once they're on the eye, they're very green looking. And not like bright, bold green, but a little more muted, which I think is perfect for someone just wanting to dabble in color. And then we have this more like pinky row. We have this more mustard leaning row. So these are neutrals with like interesting kind of undertone twist, where they are definitely, in my opinion, pretty neutral, but you've got a little bit of interest there. The shade Stone right here, which is a like iridescent duochrome, is so beautiful. Oh my gosh. It's got like a lot of green reflect in there. Beautiful. The shimmers in this are very impactful, very sparkly. In my opinion, like the most sparkly shimmers that Blend Bunny has done. So if you like that, you would enjoy this. I think these are a little messy. I mean, I always use either the NYX glitter primer or I spray a brush if I am using a brush. I would suggest that. I wouldn't go in dry with these because they do create some fallout. But an absolutely stunning, beautiful neutral palette with a twist. One of my favorite from the brand. Now, if you are a person that really enjoys neutral mattes and you just want like a pop of a fun shimmer shade on the lid, but you really want to primarily play with neutral mattes, which that's me. Like I love neutral mattes and popping a fun shimmer on the lid. I would suggest one of these two What's Up Beauty palettes. I did receive both of these in PR. I bought the All Done Up palette myself, by the way. I first received the Geodes palette last year is when this came out. And this is an absolutely gorgeous, again, I think a little more like spring leaning with these pops of more like pastel-y type shimmers on the lid. But all of these mattes, and again, I consider yellow more of a neutral. They're very neutral leaning. And then all of these pops are really pretty. This one is a little bit more safe in terms of the colors compared to the Desert Monsoon, but you have a couple of pops of more of a pinky leaning. You have a purple, you have a yellow, you have this more like green color, and then we have a duochrome that is like brown to blue. Really gorgeous, really, really gorgeous. The shimmers from What's Up Beauty are beautiful, sparkly, impactful, but not thick on the lid, not chunky on the lid, but very beautiful. And these mattes are super buttery, super blendable, really, really stunning. And then the Desert Monsoon palette I did receive this year. These shimmer shades are a little bit more colorful. I would say this bright, like indigo color, more of a vibrant purple. You still have a really pretty rosy pink. You have a champagne for the inner corner, and you have this duochrome sun, which is so pretty. It is like a gold, almost to like a green, and it's not overly shifty, but it is just that really pretty look to the lid. Oh, so beautiful. Both of these palettes, quality-wise, are phenomenal, and they do have all neutral mattes with pops of color for the shimmers, if that's what you're looking for. I only have one ColourPop palette to put in this countdown because I tell you why. They discontinue so many palettes, and I have so many palettes that could fit in this video from ColourPop, but they've all been discontinued. You guys know how I feel about the Limoncello palette if you've been here before. I love it. I love it, love it. That would be perfect for this video, but it's been discontinued. But there is one palette that I did want to mention that is available. As far as I know, it is still available, and that is the Star Wars palette. This came in very high in my countdown of the palettes from last year that I ranked. Packaging, love. I'm not a giant Star Wars fan. I like the Star Wars movies. I'm not obsessed with them like some people are. But I really feel like they did a great job of capturing the movie poster in eyeshadow form while still making it wearable, while still making it something that is easy to make looks with. And again, a lot of the mattes here are neutral. We have one pop of like a blue and one pop of a red, but I would say the rest of the mattes are neutral leaning. We have a lot of also neutral shimmers, but we also have these two marbled shades up in the corners. We have a blue, we have a red. This silver Kessel Run is like liquid chrome. Absolutely beautiful. And I feel like personally, with ColourPop shimmers, they're not always my favorite, like generally speaking as a whole. But I think the shimmers in this palette are stepped up, definitely. There's not really any duds. There's not really any shimmers that I touch and I'm like, like I do with a lot of their palettes. Love, 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 love. Quality stepped up. I love the color story. It's a lot of fun. It's inspiring. And it goes with the theme well, in my opinion. Another one of my favorite indie brands is Unearthly Cosmetics, and I have two palettes to talk about from Unearthly today. One of them I'm wearing on my eyes today, and that is the Fairy Frolick palette. And by the way, I'm only including palettes in this video of palettes that I've tested fully that I know my full thoughts on. I'm not including any palettes that have come out super recently that I am still in the process of testing. I'm only giving you ones that I've had my full thoughts on, but I do have my full thoughts on this. I created this very simple look. I didn't film it, but I can just tell you what I did. Very simple. I used the shade Snapdragon all through my crease. I used the shade Bark, this dark brown, in the outer corner. Those are the only mattes I used. And then I used the shade Queen Mab all over the lid. I brought these two mattes underneath my eye, and I used a different shade from a different palette in my inner corner. So I just used 3 shades from this palette. I've created so many beautiful looks lately from this, and I think this is the perfect fall palette. Again, neutrals, but muted colors. And I would say, like, if you are someone that likes neutral mattes, but you also want to incorporate a couple of colorful mattes, this is a really good one because you have these 2 neutral mattes, which again, I consider this yellow a neutral. And then we have this more mauve color, which is dipping the toes in color while still being neutral leaning. And then if you really want to get crazy and get a little bit of green in there, you could use this green matte as well. And I love that you have this dark brown that can deepen up any look using these 3 mattes, and it still looks good. And the mattes in this are really nice. And then the shimmers here are all different enough where they're unique, but they all go together and they can go with any of these mattes. The shimmers in this are really beautiful, really smooth yet sparkly, more of a traditional type of shimmer, which I really enjoy. Like, they're not overly textured, chunky, anything like that. Love all the selection of colors in here. I've been fully enjoying this one a lot. I do have a code with Unearthly. It's Rachel, and it will save you 10% off. It is affiliated, so thank you so much if you do use the code. I do earn a small commission if you use it. And then my other favorite palette from Unearthly, whether we're talking neutrals with a twist or not, is the Leather and Lace palette. This is one of my favorite palettes in my collection. I always say, if I were to create my own eyeshadow palette, I would draw from this for inspiration because it's got my favorite things: a row of warm tone neutrals, a row of purples, and a row of greens. What else do I need? The shade Chantilly up here is a beautiful duochrome that is like a yellowish champagne that goes to pink. It is stunning on the inner corner. I love these other 2 shimmers as well. These shimmers are a little less hard pressed in the pan than the Fairy Frolic, so I do feel like there's a little more texture to them, but they are incredibly beautiful. All of these mattes are really, I would say more on the pigmented side, but not in a way that's hard to use. I love that there's a black. I love that we have a gradient of light to deep. It makes it super easy to create looks. And I love that it is matte heavy. I love it. I just love it. Every time I've created looks with this, I've been honestly shocked at how beautiful they are. Like straight up gasping. So this one is a beautiful, beautiful neutral palette with a twist. I love it. All right, I have 2 Natasha Denona palettes to talk about, and actually I feel like a lot of her palettes could be considered neutral palettes with a twist, but I just picked out 2 from my collection to talk about today. So the first one I want to talk about is the Yucca palette, and this is, again, I would say more for someone that wants to dip their toes into those greens and yellows, and I really like this palette a lot. I will say I don't love this green just because it has a blue undertone, which I don't love. But again, that is a preference thing. There's nothing wrong with the shade in terms of quality. It's just not my preference in terms of shade. And then there are 2 cream to powders, which again, preference-wise, I don't love cream to powders from Natasha Denona, but I know I'm in the minority because so many people love the cream to powder formula. So if that is you, you probably would enjoy that. I think these shimmers are stepped up a lot. Like these last, I would say 4 or 5 palettes that she's released, she's incorporating these ultra sparkly, ultra fun shimmers, but she's also putting in a standard shimmer in here, which even the standard shimmer is beautiful. And I think even stepped up from her previous midi palettes. That's always been my complaint in the past with her midi palettes, is that the shimmers, although I love a standard shimmer, they're just something about them that fall flat for me. But this one, no, shimmers are beautiful. The quality of the mattes, as always, is beautiful. I love that we have this like super bright pastel yellow, which is so unique and fun and great for the inner corner. It goes from light to deep. Really fun, really, really fun. And if you want to play with greens and yellows, it's a good one. My favorite mini palette from Natasha Denona is the Mini Star. And I did find this online at Kohl's. Would you believe it or not, it is still available at Kohl's. I haven't seen it on Sephora. I haven't seen it on Natasha Denona's website, so I will link it down below. But this is my favorite mini. I just love the looks that come out of this. There's only 5 shades, so how much variety are you gonna get? Not a ton, but I love the look I create with this every time. I love that you have 2 different mattes that are varying in depth. That's really important to me, especially in a small palette. We have more of a standard like rose gold shimmer in the middle. We have more of an olive green leaning shimmer, which again, I love greens. I think it's the perfect gateway color. I hate to call it that, but you know what I mean. It's the gateway color to color from the neutral side. And then we have this blue to brown duochrome, which we see in a lot of palettes. And this one is ultra smooth, so it's more of the subtle side, which I can appreciate at times. And I love actually using this one on my lower lash line. I really, really, really enjoy this mini palette. There's just like a je ne sais quoi about the looks. They're sophisticated. Love it. One of my other favorites that I put in my top 3 in that top 3 eyeshadow video that I did is the Tiny Marvels palette between Sydney Grace and Mel Thompson. I was gifted this from a subscriber, Renee. Thank you so much, Renee. You introduced me to this beautiful formula. Mel did such a great job with the packaging, and then on the inside, we have this gorgeous color story. It is just amazing. I am obsessed, and I don't say that lightly, I'm obsessed with the formulation of these shades. Both the mattes and the shimmers are just incredible. The mattes are super buttery, super blendable, easy to build up, not hard to use. And then the shimmers are like ultra wet looking on the eye, not shifty, not special shades, but just good old-fashioned, beautiful, shiny metallics that are just gorgeous. I love the shade Web up here. It's like my favorite inner corner shade, and I pull into this palette a lot when I need a inner corner shade. The shade Scarab up here also is so stunningly beautiful. And I just think there is a perfect balance of neutral with some pops of color in here that you can experiment with. Pulling in one colorful shade, like using the shade Mantis on the inner corner is always pretty. Jewel Bee just putting this through the crease while adding in your neutrals. The formula of this is really hard to top. It is incredible. And then my last palette I'm gonna talk about also came in very high in my ranking all the palettes I've tried so far this year. And this is the Full Fantasy palette from Lunar Beauty and Laura Lee Los Angeles. This is one of my favorite, obviously I just said that. I was just gonna say it's one of my favorite palettes I tried this year. I just said that. Packaging, 10 out of 10. We've got that textured sun coming up with this beautiful pinky background. It's very Lunar Beauty, the packaging, right? And then on the inside, I feel like this is such a versatile neutral palette, and I would say this leans much more neutral with only a couple of pops of color, but those pops of color are purples and greens, which I love. I love that you have this duochrome here, which is more on the subtle side. So if that's what you're looking for, if you don't like over the top shifty shades, this is a really pretty one, the shade Aries. It is blue to purple. And then we have some more shiny metallics, some more standard metallics that go from light to deep. We've got a variety of really, really beautiful matte shades that are definitely more neutral leaning, but we have a purple, we have an olive green, and we have a black. And those three pops really add something different to just like an all brown palette. I think this is an incredibly easy palette to work with. I feel like you could use this for daytime, you could use it for glam, you could use it for something slightly colorful, like a little piece of a colorful look in there, or you can go just straight up neutral. I think they did an incredible job with this, and I really, really, really love this palette. I'm very drawn to it. All right, and that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments about either any of these palettes I talked about or any palettes that you think are really perfect neutral palettes with a twist. I would love to know your thoughts because I always love hearing from you. And if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot when you do that. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you would consider subscribing before you leave. I do upload videos weekly and I'd love to see you back on my channel again. I want to thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye.